Oh, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Swingman podcast. It is podcast number 103. As ever, I'm your host, Jordan Ledger, joined us all the time by Louis Halpin and Lewis Howard, and we're here to break down the NBA playoffs that we have seen so far. Chaps, it's been a good start to the playoffs. I think you'd agree, definitely. Have you got a particular sort of highlight moment of anything that's come about so far?
I mean, I think the highlight is what we're going to talk about first, so I won't say anything about it.
Let's jump straight into it. Brooklyn got bounced.
Yeah.
I don't think none of us were putting Brooklyn getting bounced. No. I mean, a few of us, you had the Celtics going through, but none of us for a 4-0 sweep.
Yeah, Louis did pick the Celtics, so I'll give him that.
Yeah, but like George said, I didn't think there'd be quite that level of dominance. Certainly, I'd have expected them to get at least one game rather than the full-on sweep. That's usually reserved for like bum teams. And they're not a bum team, but yeah, I suppose we can go into the particular details.
Are they a bum team if they're getting swept?
I think the main takeaway from the series most people took is this is probably the worst playoff series we've ever seen Kevin Durant have. And just watching how the Celtics defense managed to deal with him, I would say the emergence of Jason Tatum, he's obviously emerged, but this series may be the one that really takes him up to that top echelon in the NBA in some people's eyes. And just when you just look at the numbers and you see KD shot under 40% from the field for the entire series, that's just not a stat line you'd ever think you'd hear from Kevin Durant.
I wouldn't say they're a bad team. I think they're quite imperfectly constructed. I think obviously Kyrie and KD are best with their hands in the ball, creating isolation shots. That is the way they get their offense usually. Kevin Durant has actually voiced a few criticisms of when he was in Golden State, when they had a more ball sharing friendly offense. He wanted to, get his hands on the ball a bit more, create stuff for himself. That's where he feels his strengths are. And I do tend to agree with him, but I think he had the qualities to obviously succeed in that Warriors offense regardless. But in this instance, the matchup was obviously really bad for that, because the Celtics have an unprecedented amount, I would say, of really, really good 1v1 defenders. I know you mentioned Tatum. He guarded KD for the majority of possessions this series, and he done a really good job. And then obviously offensively on the other end, but when it wasn't Tatum, it was Jaylen Brown. There was Marcus Smart. You throw a bit of Grant Williams in there. Even Al Horford was really switching onto him quite well, especially that first game. I remember him playing particularly impressively. Then they brought in Robert Williams back into the fold, who people would have said maybe was the Celtics' best defender as well. So when you had a team that couldn't really create for others very well, because Kyrie and KD's qualities aren't really suited to that, and there's no one else in that team that can really do that, it all obviously crumbled quite well. And I think, I don't want to be a KD apologist or anything like that. He should obviously have done better in this series than he did. But I think we do have to kind of recognize the level of Boston's defense, really, because KD's not an easy person to shut down offensively. I mean, the Bucks tried to do it last season. They basically were like, we'll focus all our efforts on KD and we'll let him beat the rest of them beat us, and they couldn't do it. They almost lost, and the Celtics done it with really relative ease, to be honest.
I think just Boston as a defensive unit, as you say, there wasn't just one person taking him one-on-one. Obviously Tatum guarded him a lot, but they're just their ability to switch constantly. They threw a load of different doubles and sometimes even triples at him, and just tried to, because at the end of the day, especially with how the NBA is constructed now and officiated now, when it comes to dealing with these offensive juggernauts, you can't really stop them. You just make their life as difficult as possible. And I think that's what Boston did. And you see the results of it in that they've just gone and swept them, which as you say, no one would have guessed.
I think the one that was quite surprising for me as well is that we found, we talk about this, obviously we have a little group chat where we discuss the NBA games as they come in the morning for us. And KD dropped 39, but you're still looking at the scoreboard, and 31 shots and off of 13 made. That's not Kevin Durant. That's not the numbers you're expecting to see. And this was his best performance in a 4-game series. So the question I've got for the two of you is, do you think it would have made a difference if Ben Simmons was on this side?
I don't know about this season and how, with all the mental and physical issues he's had, the fact that Kyrie hadn't been there for essentially half the games. He missed a lot of the season. I don't think you can just bring that all together and it comes out with a victory for them in the series. Maybe they get a game. I don't know, but I wouldn't want to speculate. And I think that has one of the big issues Brooklyn has, not only with them not being constructed great, as Louis said. I think they're just horrific defensively. And when they're relying on their scorers to outscore, and if it's not happening like it didn't in the Boston series, you saw the results. But I think one of the bigger issues they have is when you're some of the other players on that Brooklyn team and you're looking at your stars and you see you've got Ben Simmons, who you're not sure, how much he actually wants to play. I don't want to go too much into all the mental and physical stuff that he's dealing with because you just don't really know from the outside. And you look at Kyrie, who hasn't played a lot of the games, and there's Kevin Durant, who gives his all, but isn't that person that galvanizes the troops. I think that leaves an impression on those role players as well. And what you end up with is a team that's just disjointed, demotivated, and in the end just won't be able to beat this Boston team who's too good for them.
Yeah, the Ben Simmons situation is as we said, we can't really comment when we don't know the sort of personal details of it. To me, it always seemed a bit of a stretch to throw him in at Game 4, as was previously rumoured, as they floated out there. I'm not sure who floated that out there, whether it was him or whether it was the team. Like you mentioned yesterday, George, they might have been trying to force his hand a little bit. Either way, I think it was quite a poor tactic because now it looks like he's bottled it. Whereas if they kept it as a surprise, then it's like, oh, he comes in. If he doesn't want to come, if he doesn't want to play, he doesn't get the criticism, basically. But he had a pretty unprecedented playoff collapse last season. It felt really bizarre to me they'd throw him into this really, really like it's like a cauldron of a series, basically, especially if it was going to be in Boston. So he would have brought the defense. He would have brought a bit of playmaking on the open floor. That's his strengths. I'm not too sure if it would have really mattered in the end, to be honest.
I think that the way that I was going about it, saying that he'd be back for Game 4, one, that was strange considering Game 3 was 2 days or 3 days before it anyway. So if you relatively speaking, if he was going to be fit for Game 4, he'd have been fit for Game 3. The thing I don't like seeing, and what I can't understand and get my head around for this. Now, I've never had a chronic back injury, which is what the Brooklyn Nets and Ben Simmons are saying that he's got. I can't understand that if you're, in warm-ups and you're there courtside in your maroon and orange trousers, then all of a sudden it's put out in the press that you're going to play in Game 4. You then have such a bad wake-up with your back that you're no longer able to make courtside and sit there. Like, that's what I can't...
Yeah.
Because he wasn't at the game, was he? Like, I'm not...
No.
He wasn't at the game for Game 4. So it's a complete standback of 2-3 days. I don't understand how you can get that bad.
Well,
this is what I'm trying to do.
He doesn't want to play.
There's no way in which he could have done anything in terms of because he's not in full court. He's not in full practice. I can't see a way in which a logical speaking, logistic mindset of how he could have actually not played in that game, in considering he was in consideration to play in Game 4. So that's when I think. I mean, Kyrie's Kyrie, so I don't think he's going to be sitting there sort of preaching about why you should have been on the call. But Kevin Durant's got to be looking at the situation and what he was sold for Brooklyn of, come with Kyrie, and then they got James Harden. And the way it's transpired, to which Kyrie played a handful of games this year in comparison to what he should have been. Going forward, if he's going to have that trust, because Kyrie's a free agent. Is he signing this year? That's the whole deal.
He's got a player option.
He's got a player option, right? So Kyrie's going to take that up. And KD's got to be looking at it going, what on earth has he got himself in for? And he's not sort of, again, you don't want to sympathise for him for that extent, but it's sort of like what he was imagining, what he was dreaming. This is far from it right now.
Yeah, but I will say I do put some of that blame on KD himself, because I just don't think he's the type of guy who will chastise some of the other players in the team and call them out and get everyone in line. I just don't think he's that type.
No,
of
but
guy.
that wouldn't matter. That wouldn't matter anyway.
No, but
It's more of just like the guys of the cards he's been dealt in terms of what he thought he was going to get are completely different.
I personally, I think as the de facto number one on that team and the best player on that team, you have to set the tone for everyone else. Like I was talking earlier about, not being able to fit everyone in when they're coming back or they haven't played for a long time. And the one thing I would say to maybe go against it is you look at the Warriors team and what they've done with fitting Clay back in with Jordan Poole and Steph Curry. I know we'll get onto them later, but I think one of the reasons why that's been so successful is the culture in Golden State with Steve Kerr, with Draymond, and with Steph. He came off the bench. I know, he's still going to get his minutes, but he's willing to do those things. Draymond sets the tone, and it allows things like that to happen much more seamlessly than in an organization like the Nets, where everything seems so disjointed. And obviously, I'm not putting all the blame on KD. I still think KD's one of the top two players in the world. I don't put the blame on him for them getting swept, because I think he gave his all compared to some people on that team who definitely didn't. But I do think he's not that sort of number one player like a LeBron, for example. I know it might be a bit unfair to compare to someone like LeBron James, but he is that sort of leader that will keep everyone in line. Although the Lakers didn't do particularly great this year, so maybe that's a little bit of an outlier.
But even with that, like if you're saying, and again, let's just use it as an example. If you're saying like LeBron can get people in line, I mean, could anyone get Kyrie and Ben Simmons?
No.
Like, it comes to a stage where you're going, I need you to start man up. Like, come on, I need some guys here to play with me. It gets to a point that I don't think anybody's going to be able to convince Ben Simmons or Kyrie, of which they've made their minds up. Ben Simmons, at any point in that, has just shown that he doesn't really. I don't want to go too harsh on the competitive fire start from it, but it's just like, go out there. If you can't play, you can't play. At least you would have tried. That's the thing. It's not like he's torn an ACL. It's soreness in the back. If you can't play, at least you would have tried. But you just don't see any of it. Kyrie's a different kettle of fish in terms of that anyway.
And I do agree. At the end of the day, the main responsibility for that is on the players themselves. It's not on just KD telling them to do it. But I just think from the top down, there's an issue in that Nets franchise that they really need to sort out.
It just annoys me more as well when you see them warming up. It's a bit like the Zion stuff. I get it's a bit different with Zion, but like when you see Zion doing like between the legs 360 like dunks in warm-ups, you're like, well, there's some level of which you could play some basketball here, but they're obviously not for some reason.
Did you see the video of Ben Simmons' dunk? It was quite pathetic, actually, in comparison to Zion's more acrobatic.
I mean, it wasn't the sort of like the rim busting dunks that Zion was doing.
I think the Zion one's different, because I think that's probably more of an argument between Zion's camp actually wanting him to potentially play and the Pelicans not wanting him to play and wanting to look after him a little bit. So I think that's a bit of a different situation.
Again, I think it's just stuff like this. It's just, you can understand it from the long sort of term vision of which these franchises and potentially the players have got, but then in the same time, it's sort of the fans are just left out with it, and it's something that's happened for years in the NBA, and it will probably go on for years, because I don't think anything's necessarily going to happen upon which I don't think we're ever going to get pay for play. I think there might be sort of a version of it with some asterisks around it, but ultimately it's just the fans that lose out. But that's enough about Brooklyn. They got bounced. Celtics are through. We'll move on to them, but first of all, we'll get on to the Mavs and Luka making the Utah Jazz feel the blues. Now we've discussed this again before. It's well known amongst this sort of collective here that my hatred is a strong word, but I think it's probably found for
distaste.
Distaste maybe. Just no idea how people. Okay, I won't go into it that much, but just Rudy Gobert on this team still finds a way to amaze me at how bad that he can be in these clutch situations. I know he got the game-winning basket the other day, but I don't care about an alley-oop on an open bucket. But the Utah Jazz have been desperately terrible in this series, I'd say. Even despite it not being a sweep, the Jazz are in some real sort of, we're going to have to blow this team up territory, aren't they?
If they lose this series, I think they will, 100%. And
Is there an if about it of them losing the series?
Well, I mean, look, it's 3-2. Anything can happen. I would hark back to the last podcast we were in, where I said there's no way that the Pelicans or the Spurs get out of the playing tournament. Paul George goes down, they get out of the playing tournament. So, and they're doing quite well against the Suns at the moment, which we'll get onto. So, I've realised I need to not be so concrete with some of these statements in the playoffs, because anything can happen.
I'm being concrete. The Mavs are going through. There's no way. I think the Mavs will go through. There's no way the Jazz are bringing this back.
I mean, they scored 77 points in the last game. They had, I think, the worst 3-point percentage in playoff history. I think they went 3 for 30, which is ridiculously bad. Donovan Mitchell scored 9 points, which is horrific. And the defensive issues are still there. No one can guard anyone on the perimeter. It's just a shambles.
The thing that and Donovan Mitchell had a tight hamstring towards the end of the game anyway.
Yeah, and he went off injured when they were getting blown out anyway.
I think he'll be fine anyway. I mean, he shouldn't have been on the floor anyway when he got injured. They were like 20 down or something. But
exactly.
I will always bang on, and if there's a Rudy Gobert bashing, I'm there for it. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, the one I do want to pick up a little bit as well, and Donovan Mitchell's got his critics for this series. Mike Conley. What has happened to Mike Conley? I know he was never he was never the sort of guaranteed top level point guard all-star. But there was a couple seasons back, he was right on the peripheral of potentially getting in there. He made an all-star weekend, didn't he? 2 years ago? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, he was one of the reserves.
He was one of the reserves, but he made all-star. And, there was a real sort of ascendancy going there. Went to the Jazz. There was this whole thing with Mike Conley. 4 points in a playoff game against the Mavs. But these are the type of games where you're sort of not even if he sees Donovan Mitchell is having a bad game, 0 of 7, 9 points. That's your time. You just pick it up, just give them 25 or something, not 4. So I just this whole team as a collective is stinky, and it needs getting rid of. The whole team, apart from Donovan Mitchell and rebuild.
Well, yeah, I was going to say if
maybe keep Jordan Clarkson as well.
If you're the Jazz, you definitely trying to hold on to Donovan Mitchell. But I mean, Donovan Mitchell might request a trade at this point.
I think he will do. The thing I have with the Jazz is I think with every team, it's important to strike a balance between obviously offensive and defensive strength. If you go too far one way, it's like the Hawks, you're just going to get battered on one end. And I think. Yeah, I can't think of an example of a really good defensive team right now that isn't good offensively as well, but you know what I mean. And the Jazz were a really good defensive team for quite a long time. Had some surprises in the playoffs when the expectations weren't too far on them. They beat the Thunder when there was Westbrook and PG there and stuff like that. And I think to try and strike that balance a little bit more, they went too far in getting sort of offensive guys like you talked about. Mike Conley, Bogdanovic is another one who just didn't turn up either. So they've got all these guys who cannot defend on the perimeter. And we had a bit of a strong debate about how far. We're not saying there's not a problem here. Obviously there is. They lost to the Mavs when they didn't have Luka Doncic, who is the genuine driving force of that offense. He has 35% usage rate and stuff like that. There's obviously a problem here, but I'm not sure if it's directly they're exploiting Rudy Gobert, which sometimes Luka's done it a couple times in the last couple games. But I think it's just they're exploiting the really weak perimeter defense of the Jazz. And Gobert obviously tries to go in the middle, which is what he's comfortable doing and where you'd rather have him, to be honest. But then that leaves the open shooter. That's what happened in the games that the Mavs won without Luka Doncic. It's been a little bit different since, I'll give it. But yeah, this is obviously just not going to work, is it? Because I don't think Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert have ever had a really good chemistry, especially after, the microphone incident, COVID and all of that. But it's just a real, the balance isn't there. It's just like the defense isn't very good when it comes to the playoff times anyway. They can chug through fine regular season. Offensively, I think that's Rudy Gobert's biggest issue. He looks genuinely lost. When it's offense, when he gets the ball in offensive situations. I mean, there was a post up in I think it was game 2. Yeah, game 2. I think it was where he genuinely looked like me in a basketball court. That's how good his offensive bag is. I'm obviously not 7'3" like he is, so that there's the key difference there. But he just doesn't cut it on that end, and the other players don't cut it on the defensive end. So where's it going to lead?
I think that, to be honest, for me, that is the main issue with Rudy Gobert when teams go small against them, is, people focus in on the defensive aspect of it. And I think Luka, more so last game than any of the other games, took advantage of Rudy a little bit. But on the defensive side, it's more so that I just think none of them can defend on the perimeter. It's not just Rudy Gobert, but I think the bigger issue when they go small, other teams, is offensively, Rudy Gobert just can't punish it.
Yeah.
And if he can't punish it and they're going small and he's having to go on the perimeter, then you do ask yourself, well, what's the point of him being on the floor then?
Yeah. There is none.
Yeah.
That's the answer to it.
That's more the problem, is you can't take advantage of the downside of going small as the Jazz. And I'm not, is it, I mean, part of it has to be because he's offensively limited, but also it just doesn't look like they play around him much on offense anyway.
I don't know what you can do you can throw him lobs. He can't do anything that isn't like set for him on a silver platter. I'm not trying to be harsh. I recognise he's got good defensive qualities, and I think in the right team, in the right scenario, he can be good in the playoffs.
And that's one of the things that I think we've said before, is if they were to get rid of Rudy Gobert or try to trade him, I know the max contract would definitely be a stumbling block, but there definitely would be a lot of teams very interested in having Rudy Gobert on their team because he's still a very good NBA player.
Yeah, I'm sure the Detroit Pistons will line out their offer for Rudy Gobert.
I think the Hawks would be nice. He's not very well respected, is one of the things I would say amongst players.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah, there is, but I also think it gets a little bit overblown.
I think the Hawks would be terrible. It would be a crime to remove Clint Capella for Rudy Gobert. Trae Young and Clint Capella is like one of the highest assists ratios to points scored.
I think
the biggest combination this year in the regular season in points was Trae Young to Clint Capella, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, stuff like that. But
I would much rather have Rudy Gobert than Clint Capella. I would like to make that clear now.
Yeah, but if it works, it works. If you put Rudy Gobert in there, Trae Young can be throwing up as many lobs as he wants, but to that stifle Eiffel, he's not going to get anything.
Yeah, but they'd be much better defensively.
They would be.
But I mean, but why would they?
Because Rudy Gobert's a much better defender and rim protector than Clint Capella is.
All right, but then, okay, and you take this series, for example, they just go 5 out against them. Doesn't mean anything. I mean,
the same issues might persist, and they probably would because the Hawks defensively aren't very
good either. So that's what I mean. So it doesn't do anything for them.
I think in the right team,
offensively in that sense.
I think in the right team, Rudy Gobert would.
I don't think there is a right team for him. This is my I just don't see.
I mean, that's your opinion.
I just don't see any team that can have long-term success in the playoffs with Rudy Gobert. And I can't see a way around it because of how offensively limited he is and how terrible he is in terms of any switching, in terms of perimeter or 5 out.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to.
Yeah,
it's an
agree to disagree. But I want
to say before we move on from this series, what a series that Jalen Brunson is having, and also unrestricted free agent this summer. He'll be getting the bag from someone, and hopefully, I'm not sure what the cap space situation is with the Mavs. I think they'd have to trade away a few contracts to give him that type of offer. But I think he works really well with Luka Doncic because he can be off ball and he can be on ball. But just a nice little emergence there from him.
And we haven't spoken too much about Luka. We've mentioned him, but if you look back at what he's done in the playoffs so far, it is absolutely historic.
Yeah.
So he is on some path right now.
Spencer Dinwiddie's been a bit of a disappointment for what I know Spencer Dinwiddie to be, but
the world's biggest Spencer Dinwiddie stand, to be fair.
Yeah, to be fair, it might be there. It might be there. Right, let's move anyway. CP3 robbed by Grand Theft Alvarado. Obviously, the big news in this series is Devin Booker going down. Still, I don't think if you'd have said at the start of the series if Devin Booker was down, don't think people would have had it 2-2 going into game 4. I would say that. So there's props there to Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum and also the big man Valanciunas, former Raptor.
He had a really good game last game.
He had a really good game.
He's been shooting absolutely horrifically for this series, but He had a really good game last game.
It's something that's definitely caught my eye in terms of the Suns being a bit, on the ropes here. There's always those little surprises that pop up in the playoffs. Has this one got legs? Do the Pelicans have an actual chance of going through here, do you think?
I actually think they have a chance. Personally, I'd still pick the Suns, but I do actually think that they have a chance because Brandon Ingram is playing out of his skin right now for the Pelicans. And I know one thing I thought was quite harsh. I can't remember who said it. Was it Draymond that said with Booker going out, the Pelicans have got the two best players on the floor, which I think is definitely a stretch. But, Brandon Ingram has probably been, with, minus Devin Booker, been the best player in the series. I know Chris Paul's had a couple unbelievable closeout games in this series, but the last one was the complete opposite. So I definitely would say the Pelicans have a chance if Booker's out for the entire series. I know he's out for game 5, and I think the timeline was like 2-3 weeks. So whether it actually sticks to that, I don't know. But I'd still pick the Suns. I think CP3 will be able to help the team get them home, and DeAndre Ayton's playing quite well as well. So I think they'll have enough. Yeah,
I think they're probably quite taken aback or stifled by the just true youthful energy that the Pelicans bring. I mean, you mentioned some of those players, but we've got to talk about Grand Theft Alvarado and his trademark stealing technique, which Chris Paul shrugged off in game 1. Cut to a couple games later, and he's getting it taken from him for a big bucket. Herb Jones as well has been really excellent. And I'm not sure if you saw the clip of where CP tries to help him up and he just doesn't take it. It's just that sort of like, not disrespect, just like, we're not afraid of this team whatsoever. They've got no expectations on them really going into it. So I don't see why they would do. I think CJ McCollum's really underrated.
Yeah, I think CJ McCollum's had a really, really good series as well.
Yeah.
Apart from the game 1, I think he was quite bad in. But the fit of Larry Nance Jr. in terms of this team as well defensively is very, very key. That's why they've been after him for a little while. He works very well with them. I can't help but find myself thinking what this series would look like with Zion. It's such a shame. Again, fans are just losing out in terms of watchability in terms of this series. But the thing with it is that, and it was on one of the American talk shows, they were talking about this series and Chris Paul now. This is probably, and I know we said this a couple of years back in terms of best chances, this is probably going to be his best chance to win a ring this year. And in this series so far, it seems he's having a good game, a bad game, a good game, a bad game, and the age catching up to him. Again, there's the whole fine wine moments with CP3, but I do start to worry what if there's just 2 bad games in a row? Because if Chris Paul doesn't play well, I don't think the Suns necessarily win the games, because as CP3, he's just their he's a talisman. He's everything around it. If he's not getting going, no one else in that team at the minute without Booker is going to get them going. So that's the worry, because Jay Crowder's not looked good at all, and it's just
I think Valanciunas is really slamming Ayton on the offensive balls. Not that he's been playing too badly, but that's where their strengths lie in the Pelicans. I think they're getting a lot of second chance opportunities, and they're feeding off of them. But when you say it like that, you would have rather, obviously, you would rather neither of them go down. But it probably would have been Chris Paul you'd rather go down than Devin Booker, because they played a lot of the season without Chris Paul anyway. I think I'm not saying they're going to beat them or anything like that. I think they're a good enough team that they'll really.
I think they can take it game 7.
I think they can win. Yeah, it wouldn't be my pick.
Yeah, basically what I was saying.
Yeah, I think that the Suns win the next 2 games. Personally, I think that they'll just use a bit more of their experience. I think Chris won't let that happen to him again. But like you say, maybe it's out of his hands now. Maybe it's not a mental thing. Maybe it's not anything like that. Maybe it's physical. But I don't feel like that has been a trait of him this season, really. So I'm still going to lean towards the Suns, although I may have gone a bit overboard on my hype and predictatron before this playoffs game.
Need a bit more JaVale McGee in the lineup.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway, talking of big centres, let's move on to one of the biggest ones in the league. Sixers stumble in Jurassic Park. You really do hate to see it. It was this series where we thought, everyone was wrong. It's definitely not going to be a tough one for Philly, and they're going to, walk it. And then all of a sudden it's 3-2, and now Philly are looking like, oh crap, are they going to bottle this again? terrible night in terms of Wells Fargo anyway. But I can't help but think that they've just let the Raptors back in this by just not playing well enough and not being aggressive enough. I think there's obviously the props that you'll hand out to the Raptors for it, but I think it's a case more of the Philly are fumbling the ball rather than the Raptors taking it off them personally.
Yeah, especially without Fred VanVleet as well for the last game. You'd have expected Philly to be able to get the job done at home, but Embiid got outscored by Siakam. Harden didn't have a good game, and Toronto took it pretty handily. So it's definitely not what we were expecting. Although I did think it was going to be a difficult series at the start, but as you say, Philly raced out to a 3-0 lead, and everyone thought, "Oh well, sweep it inbound." And now you see 3-2. You look to Doc Rivers, you think, "What's happened in the past?" And you're like, surely
he's just getting out coached. He's just getting out coached in terms of these series at the minute. He's just getting out coached from Nick Nurse. It's not work. And then the thing that starts to get a bit shaky is where you have Embiid coming out afterwards, and there's like Harden needs to take more shots, and coach needs to be on Harden to take more shots. And then sort of situations, you're like, okay, so you're not just going at one, you're going at both, and you want to try and sort of publicly agitate both of them into doing what you want to do here. So there's the underlyings of sort of if it goes wrong in game 6, then it's a big sort of alarm bells because all the pressure is on Philly, especially going 3-0 up. So
I will say with the sort of the calling out, as you said, of Embiid with Doc Rivers, I do think Embiid and Doc Rivers have the personalities where I don't think that'll be too much of an issue. When it comes to Harden and Embiid, I don't know. I don't really know how that.
Harden deep down must know he's playing terribly to his standards. There's got to be some sort of morality compass there that will let him know that I've got to welcome the criticism because he's not been the Harden of which Philly fans were expecting.
Well, you said about Chris Paul maybe physically not breaking down as such, but wilting under a little bit of this pressure. I don't think this James Harden is the same one as a couple years ago physically. I don't think he has the same type of burst to get to the rim, draw those free throws that he done at a historic rate back in the day. I think he looks just not in real amount of shape to do what you want him to do, really, take those amount of shots. I mean, if you want him taking a load of 3-pointers and jump shots, then I'm sure he'd happily oblige, and you have one game where that does really well, and you have one game that it doesn't. So it's a bit of a gamble in that respect.
I don't think I've seen James Harden take a catch and shoot 3 for the Sixers. I genuinely don't.
He doesn't really move off ball, so
no, I don't
doesn't
get the space at all for it. So, but I'll be quite surprised if I'm being honest. I'll be quite surprised if Philly win it game 6, considering it's back in their house. I don't see the way in which the Raptors are going to sort of the crowd's going to be so up for that game with everything that's in their history between playing the Sixers in knockout games anyway. But
I will say you've got a mental scar for this, though. Me and Lewis are a little bit more removed. We don't have an affection towards the Philadelphia 76ers, so maybe I'm looking at it a bit more objectively. I think we do have to mention that Joel Embiid's a little bit injured.
Yeah, I mean the injury is a thing, and it will affect most likely sort of jump shooting and things like that. But even so, there's points in this series where, and I love Embiid, I love his drive, but there's moments where he's sort of trying to get a 3 in crunch times, and you just like use your big body on Pascal Siakam and just make a 2 and get an and 1 and things like that. He just doesn't do those
because
things.
He has the size advantage, doesn't he?
He has the size, yeah. He does, but you just like bread and butter, take the meat and drink of a centre here and just score the easy points. And then if you need to, when you're up, you can take these 3s. But it's sort of, I don't know. I'll be quite surprised if they win game 6 and it'll go back to them on game 7. And I'd expect them to close it out, but it's the Sixers, so who knows?
Yeah, I think Philly will be able to close it out. If I had to say, I think I'd probably say 7 games as well. But I think in at least one of the next 2 games, Embiid will have a big game and they'll be able to close it out.
Yeah, I think he closes it out next game personally. But I've got to say, impressive coaching job from Nick Nurse. I think Nick Nurse is the best coach in the league. That's I'm not sure if that's a controversial opinion.
No, I think a lot of people would say he's the best coach in the league, or at minimum top 3.
Yeah, but Siakam's got caught a lot of slander playoff time. Previously he's doing really well.
He has, yeah.
Precious Achiuwa's been playing really well as well. I think.
Yeah, I think he outscored James Harden last game. And
if
he's doing that, and then Siakam's out scoring Embiid, then the Sixers are losing the game.
Yeah, and Scotty Barnes hasn't even really played well this series because he got injured game 1. So
yeah, but congratulations to him. We
of
should
course.
say Rookie of the Year. Then a very close result as well.
Definitely. The trophies. We were talking about the trophies last time as well. I think for these, and they've caught some opinions on Twitter for the changes. And personally, I am a fan. I think they're a little understated, but I do like them. But
I hope that's sarcasm because they are tragic.
No, I think they're quite good. They're not as good as what they used to be, but they're a little bit more unified.
They're a bit generic. So. I think.
Yeah,
what I would say.
But, anyway, we'll move it on. We'll talk about another centre. Is it true that a cat always lands on its feet? We'll talk about this series, and he needed the last game. In game 4, Cat had a big game. He did need that because there was a lot of criticism coming his way over this series of not being aggressive enough, not sort of taking ownership of his team. And he did. He came up with 33 and 14 and they won that game by 1 point. But, this is what we want to see from Cat in terms of the dominance and of what he can do with the ability he's got. Because I think people will never question the fact that he's got that ability of being that stretch 5, but it was just never, ever seeing it in playoff times or when the lights were shining at their brightest was the criticism level to him. Now that we're seeing it, this series has been really good in terms of Memphis Timberwolves in that regard, but I still can't see a way of which, even if they do that again, I just think that Memphis are going to come back at them twice as hard next game now.
It's a real back and forth this series. You look at Cat and you look at Ja Morant, and they're both having, you talked about before Chris Paul having a good game and a bad game. These two are really taking it to the extreme. Like Cat has been horrible in some of the playoff games, but also looked like the best player on the court. And Ja Morant has also had a couple games where he's definitely been under par and a couple where he's led the way. And then you look at the next player, maybe even not the next player down for the Timberwolves, but you look at Anthony Edwards and he's been playing consistently well. You look at Desmond Bane for the Grizzlies, he's also playing really well. And I think the way this series is going to turn out is purely going to be on which one of Cat or Ja Morant can be more consistent. I think there's more variance with the Timberwolves purely because how deep and how good a team all around the Grizzlies are. So I think the pressure is more on Cat to be able to be consistent. But I did think before this series started, I think I picked Memphis in 5 in the first round because I thought they were going to end up playing the Clippers, but I got that wrong. They ended up playing the Timberwolves. But I think I said in the podcast before, if they did end up playing the Timberwolves, it would be a difficult series because they have struggled with them before. And I think that is what we're seeing. If I had to pick, I would go with the safer option purely because I think Ja has the better team to fall back on if he does end up having another one of these difficult games. But I do think the other reason I would side with the Grizzlies is because I think he has the right mindset in terms of bouncing back from some subpar performances.
I think the Grizzlies done really well to make the adjustment after game 1 and taking out Steven Adams, because I think he ended up with 0 points that game, and that's one of the games that Towns played really well in. And I think that type of centre, going up against that type of centre, a bit more slow, a bit more lumbering, really, really suits him because he's obviously got that perimeter game to him. He's a really skilled centre, but he also likes playing against those sort of slow, lumpy guys. He's kind of a bit slow and lumpy himself, to be honest. It's kind of his wheelhouse. So they done well to adjust from that, and they have played a lot better since. The back and forth of this series is just mental to me. The Timberwolves will go on like a 20-0 run, and then they'll go on an 0-20 run. I mean, the game 3 in Minnesota, I thought it was over after that. Yeah, because that is one of the worst collapses I have ever seen.
The Timberwolves should be up 3-1 right now, 100%.
Exactly. So that gives me some confidence. The fact that they've come back from that collapse, maybe it's not a bigger mental thing as I'm making it out to be, but to me, I thought they were done after that because it was just such a humongous lead to give up and such a mental blow to young players. But yeah, I'm leaning towards the Timberwolves on this. I think it is a slightly bad matchup for the Grizzlies in that respect, but it's a bit of a sort of duel of fouling big men because Carl-Anthony Towns can't stay on the floor because he fouls about 4 times in a half. I don't know why Chris Finch doesn't take him out. And the same with Jaren Jackson. When he's playing well and when he doesn't foul, he's really good, but he fouls a lot and he's not very consistent. So there is that to it. I get the Grizzlies have a better team to lean on. I'm just waiting for the Ant-Man to take over. I think this is his team, if I'm quite honest. I think it will be his team going forward.
I think that as well.
So I don't think I place the emphasis on Towns as much as you do. I think this is more of a Ja Morant versus Anthony Edwards series than it is a Ja Morant versus Karl Towns series.
The way I see it in terms of fully get that as well. I do think that, I mean, in this series, Memphis have the best player. Ja Morant is the best player in this series. For me, I'm looking more at what Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to do in terms of supporting Ja Morant. The last game is not good enough. You can't foul out with 7 points in terms of that. If he steps it up a little bit, they'd have won that game. I know you can swing it in any way and forth, but I think when they're going back in terms of, I think the next game they've got one tonight and then they go back to Minnesota on Friday. I'm expecting Jaren Jackson Jr. to have a big road game, considering what he did last time. So I think he'll learn from that in Game 6, and that's the key for it for me there. Anyway, we'll move on. We'll go through the other side. We'll go through Hawks and the Heat, and the ice tray has been frozen solid. It's not been a series to remember at the minute for Trae Young fans. So Nathan, our graphic designer, put your hands over your ears when you talk about it, when you hear this, because there's going to be some Trae Young slander inbound, I think, for it. At home, you can't drop 9 points in a playoff game. You can't. Not when it's when you're the point guard, you're the main guy. And the criticism that's leveled at him in terms of, the praise that's leveled at him in terms of some of the stupid shots that he makes is also what he'll die by in terms of the stupid shots that he's taking of three. And like 10 threes he made, and some of them are just from crazy angles and pulling up from almost half court when you can't be doing this when you're not hot. That's right. If it's a heat check shot and you're on 35, 40 points for the game, but you need to get other guys going. If you're playing bad, get the other guys going in your team. I know Hunter got like 25 in that match, but there are moments in these playoff games, especially like a Spoelstra team like the Heat, that want to grind you down and want to make everything difficult for you. Don't hand it to them on a plate. Yeah,
I mean, I will say, when we look at this series, the Heat are definitely meant to win this series. I think. Oh yeah. I think I gave the Hawks a game. I mean, if I maybe gave them 2, I think I gave them a game. And when you talk about Trae, he definitely has been incredibly underwhelming this series. You talk about the shots he's taking. I think with Trae Young and this Hawks team, they give him the license to just shoot when he wants, pull up when he wants, and you live and you die by that. And some games he will put up some huge numbers, and some games he doesn't, and it works. It's worked to a decent extent. Last year they got to a conference finals, and they had a pretty poor time in the league for a long period, and then flipped it on its head, and they had some great times. So it really is just you live and you die by Trae Young with this team. I think what the really killer thing is not only the poor shooting displays, it's just the turnovers. The turnovers just absolutely kill them.
It's the turnovers that kill them, and also it's big bad Jimmy Butler putting in playoff game after playoff game. When you look at the Heat now as well, you've got Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Oladipo, Hero, and Kyle Lowry when he's back. That's 5 unbelievable talented players, and then you got some nice vets that have got really good experience, like your PJ Tuckers and that, and Duncan Robinson, who's not had the best of series in terms of what we'd expect from him. But it's opened my eyes a little bit more to the Heat now, especially with Chris Middleton going down. There's a way around it of which it wouldn't shock me. But I don't want to go too overboard on the Jimmy Butler stuff because the Hawks defense is just so bad. I mean, that guy hasn't come anywhere close to scoring 40 points since I think the NBA Finals like 2 years ago. So that there is that to it. But they are a scary team. They're deep. They'll make things hard for you. They don't mind playing. They're a slow team. That's what they like to play. And when you're focused on a team which is so centric
so Trey centric, and sometimes I don't really like the way he plays. If I'm quite honest, it's not born out of it. There's a little hint of selfishness with him, I feel like, that I don't get from other players, but who have high usage, I should say. But that's just a personal preference, I think, more than anything. Like you said, you live by him, you die by him. I can't criticise it too much because they did make an Eastern Conference Finals, but in this series it's not working because they can focus all their efforts on him because they know he might not pass and he might throw up ridiculous shots. So, this has been quite a favourable matchup looking at it in retrospect. They might win another game tonight because I do think, Hawks offensively are talented enough to get another game. But it's quite an easy breeze for them.
I personally think Miami just take it all from here.
Yeah, I think it's over.
Well.
I think it's over. So,
so
they go back to Miami tonight.
Nice and rested for the Philadelphia 76ers, perhaps, or the.
This is what I said before. I mean, at the minute, what I said for the Heat Sixers is pretty much to a T. I said it will go 7 for Heat Toronto. 7.
You didn't think they'd go 3-0 up, though, did you?
No, I didn't think they'd go 3-0 up, but I'd say Philly would go Game 7, Heat would go in 5, and the Heat would be nice and rested. They'd play Philly, who are knackered, and they'd dispatch Philly in 5. So at the minute, some of my predictions have been woefully bad, but that one I've got pretty much sort of spot on at the moment. But that's where we are with that. But anyway, we'll keep on trucking. We'll move over. The Warriors swooped the Nuggets, but they didn't. It went wrong.
Yeah.
MVP Jokic candidate. I think when I say candidate, I'm pretty confident it's all but done. It's just not been announced. I think he's probably got his award. He probably got it like 2 days ago. They've just not released the film yet.
Training facility.
I think they're probably just waiting. They probably didn't want to announce it in case he did get swept and align it with that time. But he'll probably get it Thursday, Friday night. Nuggets won the game 126 to 121. Jokic dropped 37, but I think they're just living on borrowed time. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah,
I don't see it. No one's going to be going, the Nuggets have pulled one back and now they're going to go 4-3. I think it's just.
I mean, it's just. You look at Jokic's stats for the series. I'll quickly read them out now. And he's got averaging just over 31 points, nearly 12 rebounds, 5 assists, and nearly 2 steals on 56% shooting. That's that you'll take that, but then you look at the other side and that's good. But what I'm reading out now is just ridiculous. Steph's nearly got 28 points. Clay's nearly got 25 points. Jordan Poole's almost got about the same points. It's all on ridiculous efficiency. And when you look at those numbers, not only can the Nuggets not live with it, no team in the entirety of the NBA can live with those numbers. And yes, they're definitely inflated because the Nuggets just aren't that good a team outside of Jokic currently, with their 2 best players missing. But if the Warriors can put up those numbers against some other teams in the NBA, they are going very deep in this playoffs.
Yeah, I think obviously I'm really sort of curious to see how good that death lineup, as it's been called. They've come up with a couple nicknames, I think, for the 3 guards. I've heard 3G floated about, which I don't really like. Just call them Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and Jordan Poole, if I'm quite honest. But I'm curious to see how good it is because, you just railed off the stats. If you watch the games, you can tell that they look really, really good. Mm-hmm. But I do think, to a man, if you go through every single player in these teams, I think the Nuggets might have the worst team, Eastern Conference, Western Conference, in the playoffs, to be honest. And, I know the Pelicans finished 10th. They didn't get to 40 wins or anything like that. But I just think they have a higher talent base in their teams, personally. Other than you got Jokic, the MVP, and then you got a load of bums, basically. I mean, because the best players are injured.
I think one thing that sums that up is I think there's 2 players in the NBA at the moment in the playoffs who are currently averaging stat lines of 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists. And it's Giannis and Jokic. And Jokic's team are 1-3, and Giannis's team are 3-1. So
yeah. So that sort of puts it in a few doubts in my mind how good this Warriors team is. I do think it is good, but I'd like to see it against a better team, if I'm quite honest.
Yeah, if Memphis do come out against the Timberwolves, I think that'll be a real test for that death lineup to see how they do. Because as I said, I do think no team in the NBA could live with those stat lines, but we have to remember it is the Nuggets they're playing, and hopefully some other teams will be able to put up more of a fight against against them three offensively.
Yeah, I'd like to see how Jar handles defensively against that, because I think an underrated component of the Timberwolves series is he's not been very defensively. I mean, Pat Bev dropped the too small on him. He's going to be have his work cut out for him if he's going to be one of the people defending those three guards. And I think it'd be a really bad matchup if Minnesota came out, because that you can't really go. I mean, Carl could punish them if they go small, but he'd also get rinsed. He just would do. So yeah, I think the Colts is looking pretty good for a Western Conference Finals, if I'm quite honest.
And I will say it did feel kind of classic Warriors-like in that Denver game, that even when Denver won, they had like a 15-point lead at one point, and it just felt like nonchalantly the Warriors decided, you know what, we're just gonna start shooting and laying in fire, and it just whittled away in about a quarter and was down to it being quite even.
Yeah, Jordan Poole is just so good. Like unbelievable. He was playing in the G League last year. I think he should have been up for Most Improved Player. I think he probably should have won it over Ja Morant, actually, now that I think about it. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about license to shoot, and the Warriors have definitely put their trust in him and given him that green light to just go when he wants to go.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of times where I've seen Clay, get a little bit frustrated with it. But at the end of the day, if he's putting up the production that he is, you can't argue with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Draymond says he has to start over Steph Curry, so that's pretty much the biggest compliment you can get. They haven't even used Jonathan Kuminga. It is a bit scary when you look at it. I'm starting to think my faith in the Suns maybe was not misplaced, but I'm getting a little bit worried.
It'd have been great to see what this team would look like with James Wiseman in it as well. That's a shame of it, but fair enough. We'll close this podcast out. We'll move on to the last series. No Middleton, no problem though for the Bucks. There was some doubt. I wouldn't say doubt, but some caution applied when Middleton went down, and there was reports that he'd be out for 3 to 4 weeks. People were going, okay, the Bucks might not in trouble in this series, but in trouble in terms of getting out in the conference finals. I think everyone Giannis on his own, he's going to clear the balls here. I think no one's really going that bad. I think it was just bad timings in terms of the ball still in a game upon which that happened. But I think the Bulls are without Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso for the next game anyway. So any chance that they had has pretty much gone as far as I'm concerned with that anyway. Do we really see it as an issue in terms of conference finals for the Bucks without Chris Middleton? So say he's out for the entirety of it and he doesn't come back for any course of it.
Yeah. I've seen quite a few people say they think that the Middleton injury looked more serious than what the Bucks are letting on. I actually agree with them. I'd be surprised if he comes back in these playoffs at all. And if that's the case, I don't think they'll have any problem to get past the Bulls now. But I do think without Middleton, the Celtics are going to be really difficult for them. And if you ask me to pick now, I'd maybe even go for the Celtics to get to the conference finals over the Bucks, because with Middleton against them in the past, he has been unbelievable against the Celtics in some games. So if he's not going to be there for the entire series, which I think might be the case, then I'd probably pick the Celtics to get past them.
And you've just seen what the Celtics can do when given the chance to game plan against a seemingly unstoppable offensive juggernaut, really, haven't you? They provided the template to stop KD, who literally people said you can't stop. There is a template to stopping Giannis. It might be a little bit difficult. He may have figured some things out. But I do they've got some players for it.
That template is a little bit outdated. We'll say for Giannis. I think the Bucks as a team are a different animal to the Nets as well. I just think they're as a unit much better. I think Giannis will definitely get his in that series, but I do think without Middleton being there to help close the games for the Bucks against the Celtics, and as you say, the Celtics have got a lot of big, lengthy bodies to throw at Giannis. I think that will probably be too much for the Bucks to do.
That'll be a really, really good watch. I think Bucks Celtics. That'll be such a very, very good series to watch. In terms of, I completely agree. I think the wall, the quote unquote wall that they would just put up against Giannis, I don't think you can do that anymore. I think he's got a very good jump shot in him. We've not seen it necessarily in these big playoff crunch time moments as of yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if he can pull it out against Boston. Drew Holiday, Bobby Portis is playing well. They've got vets like Brook Lopez as well to call on. I think it will be tough. I think Giannis, if they can get him on Al Horford, it's disastrous in terms of for the Celtics. I don't care what they're like defensively now. But I'd still probably just edge the Bucks right now, purely because they've got the best player in the series. Giannis is the best player on that call. But yeah, it's definitely not an easy challenge. It's definitely not an easy road for them now.
Yeah.
With losing Chris Middleton, they're right up against it in terms of going through. But I would put my money on the Bucks.
Drew Holiday will have to have a huge series as well, because I think there have been times in the last playoffs at least where he was a bit underwhelming and a bit inconsistent in some games. Overall, obviously, they ended up winning. So.
Oh, have we lost it? I think
I think we might have done.
Yeah, we might have just lost it. Oh no, he's back.
Yeah, no, there was a little bit there. I think, I'm good now. And I realised everyone froze for a second. I thought, this is great. I'm talking to myself.
All right. I think it'll be close. They've got. I forget. Every now I saw he came on for a few minutes in the highlights against the Bulls. They've even got like Serge Ibaka, so they've got some nice little pieces that could be there to use in the Boston series, but. I'd probably right now, if you had to ask me, I'd probably say in 7 for the Bucks, but who knows?
You counting the Bulls out then in the series?
I mean the Bulls haven't got Levine and Caruso for Game 5, so in their must wins, that's their perimeter defense on in their secondary scorer. So.
DeRozan had a big game 2, but you could tell like the shots he was hitting were just mental. It was unsustainable, and he's been a bit slandered at the moment, as playoff DeRozan is a bit of a meme. They're out there. So at least they got a game. They got done better than I thought they'd do.
Yeah, it's very enjoyable to watch it in the NBA, because even though we can sit here and predict sort of, we expect these to go through to the conference finals, I think you could argue for 4 or 5 teams right now of who you could end up winning a chip. You could put your hat on. You could put your hat on the Bucks. You could put your hat on Boston. I think there's the arguments to be made there for Miami. There's the argument to be made for Golden State, and there's the argument to be made for the Suns. There's no sort of, you've got your sort of just edged ones, but there's no outright favourite. I don't think in my eyes. I don't think there is in the bookies' eyes. It could fall any way of 5 or 6, and for a viewing point, it's great. Unfortunately, the Sixers not really in this fight, but from the outside currently, it could all change in a week. But at the moment, I wouldn't put them in those 5 or 6. But that's where we are. But no, I think that's pretty much us. We're all chatted out, and we just made it under the hour mark. So, have we got anything else? Evie, you want to bring something up?
All good from me.
I think that's it. So thank you very much for listening. Make sure you're following us on all of our socials at Swingman Pod. Check out our website at www.swingmanpod.com. And keep enjoying the playoffs. We'll be back soon next week, probably to hash up the semi-conference finals and potentially the conference finals, seeing where we are. And thank you very much for listening, and peace.